Le principal défi, c'est toujours le renouvellement. C'est une association qui a 100 ans, mais on souhaiterait qu'elle dure encore 100 ans. Donc, elle devra se renouveler, se remettre en question, revoir ses pratiques et toujours avancer, toujours évoluer au rythme des sociétés et au rythme des gouvernements et des municipalités qui la composent.
Encore là, c'est une question qu'on peut prendre à deux niveaux. C'est-à-dire, l'ATC a d'abord, d'après moi, un défi. Moi-même, étant Québécois, je me rends compte que l'ATC est mal connu dans les milieux francophones. Vous savez, au Québec, on a la QTR, l'Association québécoise du transport, et on aurait sûrement à gagner beaucoup à enrichir, disons, le croisement ou l'interconnexion entre les deux organisations pour rejoindre les gens du milieu municipal québécois en particulier, pour qui l'ATC est un peu lointaine. Il y a aussi la question de la langue, c'est pas facile à résoudre, mais je pense que c'est un défi qui est très important et au moment où les moyens de communication électronique, les moyens de réseautage social, les moyens d'échange électronique sont si puissants. Et je sais que l'ATC fait déjà des avancées dans ce côté-là, mais je pense qu'il faut garder à l'esprit vraiment beaucoup ce défi de faire la connexion vers les francophones et de faire en sorte que les gens y trouvent aussi un sentiment d'appartenance à l'ATC. Sur le plan plus professionnel et technique, ce que je vois, évidemment, le grand défi, je pense, est toujours encore en le ramenant principalement autour de du secteur des transports urbains. C'est évidemment un défi de financement. C'est un défi de trouver des sources de financement requises à faire des investissements dans les villes, surtout dans les systèmes de transport collectif. Évidemment, le problème dans les grandes agglomérations en est un de congestion qui est vraiment impressionnant. Il n'y a pas de solution facile. C'est pas évident du tout de comment on peut composer avec cette demande en transport qui va pas cesser de s'accroître. Et donc, les investissements massifs qui sont requis dans les systèmes de transport collectif. Donc, un défi de financement au moment où les moyens, les STI, les systèmes d'information, les systèmes de transport intelligents nous amènent vers la faisabilité de solutions de type utilisateur-payeur, de tarification à l'usager. Du domaine routier, mais aussi dans les autres secteurs des transports, on va avoir des opportunités de développer de nouvelles façons de penser le financement routier, le financement des transports et éventuellement même la gouvernance. C'est le défi, pour moi, principal, hein, le financement lié au problème de congestion dans les villes, la perte d'efficacité importante que nos villes connaissent actuellement avec la congestion chronique, sachant que les solutions routières ne peuvent pas arriver à solutionner ça. C'est vraiment le défi là, des 20 prochaines années pour nous.
D'emblée, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que l'ATC a su faire face aux défis qu'on a vus dans le passé. Donc, il a fait face aux nouveaux besoins de mobilité et je suis assuré que l'ATC sera capable de faire face aux futurs besoins. Quels sont ces futurs besoins? C'est sûr, comme en milieu urbain, on peut penser aux usagers de la route le plus vulnérables. Donc, les piétons en mobilité réduite, évidemment les cyclistes. Donc, des attentes au niveau d'une nouvelle forme de mobilité qu'on a. Ce qu'on peut voir aussi, on a des nouveaux besoins à répondre. Des fois, on cherche une expérience dans nos rues, une expérience dans nos routes qui est différente. On peut penser la rue souvent comme une question de mobilité. On peut penser comme la route comme une question de besoin de mobilité à rencontrer. Mais souvent, c'est une expérience, un lieu de destination. Donc, il y a des rues, il y a des routes qui sont en soi, par leur panorama, par l'expérience qu'on y vit, dans le fond, un lieu de destination, comme d'autres lieux de destination sur notre territoire. C'est évident que ça aussi, c'est un enjeu de faire changer l'expérience qu'on a sur nos rues et nos routes. Les autres enjeux, l'important, c'est l'impact de l'innovation technologique sur la mobilité. tous les outils d'aide, dans le fond, au déplacement qui se développent à une vitesse assez effrénée, comment ça va changer notre mobilité? Est-ce que ça va augmenter notre mobilité ou la réduire? Et ça, c'est particulièrement intéressant. Et la demande en transport risque de changer dans les prochaines années. Puis c'est les principaux défis. L'intégration de l'aspect de sécurité dans nos déplacements, de l'expérience, dans le fond, de l'innovation. Bref, le principal enjeu, ça va être d'avoir une mobilité durable et intelligente.
I think our biggest challenges are the tax and the agencies. Basically, we're having sort of shrinkage budgets. So how to maximize the dollars that we spend for the transportation sector. And TAC will need to adapt because our budgets are tightening. So when we're looking at from a training point of view, when we're looking at from a research point of view, we need to maximize our dollars. So the TAC will be a very good forum to bring all the people together that way. The other probably major change will be the demographics. When we look at most agencies, probably 35 to 45% of the senior management staff will be retiring. And so that'll be a huge gap that'll be left. And TAC will have to play a major role to basically train some of our new people coming into our industry, particularly the young students, to attract them into our sector. TAC can play a major role that way at the university level, at the college levels, to bring technical people in to basically our industry that needs them for future growth. So from that perspective, I see TAC will play a major role, central role, from a national perspective to actually assist for us to actually carry forward.
Well, I'd like to put that in sort of a world context. I think there are 3 or 4 really big things that we're facing as a species, humankind. One of them is obviously climate change and what that's doing to habitat and food and water and infrastructure. I'll leave it at that. But what TAC can do there, obviously it can't solve climate change, but it can make transportation more resilient in that context. So we can, through our forum type process, try to make our systems more robust in terms of extreme weather conditions, these big floods that we've been having all over the place, and heat waves that are going to get worse, we think. And also I've lost my train of thought now. The
global.
Yeah. Oh, also to make the vehicles that we use on the systems more efficient and less polluting, less emitting of carbon dioxide and so on. That's one thing. Another thing I think is we've seen in 2008 some really bad economic and financial mismanagement, particularly in New York, on Wall Street, and that has thrown us into a cocked hat in terms of our financial performance. We're all short of money now as a result of it. It's not the only thing, but it's been a big contributor. And so funding, as I mentioned earlier, is really important in transportation. And what TAC can do there, and is doing, in fact, is with the Finance Committee of the Urban Transportation Council and other forums, is looking at ways to try to produce more stable and reliable funding that's based on user benefits directly as much as possible, and also influences people's behavior to use the system more efficiently. That, I think, again, it's a source of information. It's not making recommendations. It's saying, look, these are the things that are out there you can use, and I think that's going to have an impact on funding transportation through not only good times but bad economic times, which we're coping with now. And finally, again, looking at the world situation, we've got problems of ideology and power struggles going on throughout the world, and not so much in Canada, thank God. And that has an effect on public unrest, terrorism as a possibility, and of course even warfare. Again, TAC can't solve that kind of thing, but it can help our transportation, both our governments and our industries, to make transportation more secure and strike a balance between that and still having free flow commerce and people's travel, which is terribly important.
I would say the economic situation is continuing to evolve. So TAC definitely need to keep their business plan dynamic and adaptable. And I can see, TAC is doing a very like 3 years business plan, and that signifies that TAC is very dynamic. They basically look at each business plan and then continue to look at the current economic situations. I think the challenges to TAC will be very much on continue to sustain its mission, and also at the same time sustain its budgets, to finance all these the vision of TAC. So I think that will be the challenge. And also, I would say the other important thing is to engage the members, and also continue to add values to the memberships. And I think that will be the challenge with the shrinking budgets.
I see two classes of vehicles coming. I see vehicles with embedded intelligence and vehicles which we will begin to refer to as conventional, where the intelligence is all in the driver. The challenge TAC will have is communicating effectively to both these vehicle groups, not forgetting the conventional one and the communication information that's so important along the roadway, while catering to the intelligent one, which will begin to fill out the market.
I think one of the major challenges is that we've always been very focused on the transportation infrastructure, and predominantly, as I've said before, on the highways and roads. And I think we're going to have to take a more systems approach, because what do we build roads for, or highways for, is for drivers and vehicles. And we have to recognize that it's an interaction between drivers, vehicles, and roads. And when you take a look at it from that perspective, there's an awful lot of emerging technologies. We can foresee in the future driverless vehicles, smart roads, the demand for information that is going to be required, and we're going to have to address all of those as we move forward. Another big aspect, and we're already having to deal with it, but I think it's just going to get even more forceful as we move forward, is there's more demand for taxpayers' dollars, or dollars everywhere in society. And so we're going to be asked to do more with less money. And so that then you have the balance between managing our assets that are already out there, as well as building capacity as we move forward in an ever-growing nation. And there's more and more people, and the population is growing. So we're going to have to manage all of that. And how do we leverage new technologies into trying to do more with less?
Well, I think I mentioned climate change. I think that's definitely an issue that is well recognized globally now, is something that we have to be able to respond to with changing sea levels, with storm cell events that are becoming more frequent, storms that are putting more snow or more rain on snow, that are causing erosion difficulties that affect our transportation corridors. That's certainly going to be an issue. Source water control is an issue, and the potential for having to treat salt runoff, contaminant runoff from road surfaces that get into headwater areas. Those are going to be issues. And then just the regulatory regimes. The term green taping has been coined in the recent few years. And that's the opposite, obviously, of the red tape issue. So how do we make processes more efficient, but yet meet the needs of the public to ensure that environmental, social, sustainable opportunities come with our transportation projects?
Well, there are many. How's that for simplifying it? I think, first of all, of TAC being able to respond to the emerging issues, and some of those emerging issues are quite large. Sustainable funding, for one, clearly is one that we are wrestling with. Public health and transportation is another. Travel behavior, trying to change some of that, clearly is another. The aging demographic. I think that the emerging issues are quite significant, and it will be challenging for TAC to be able to maintain its capacity and broaden its scope sufficiently within the Council Committee framework to continue addressing those. And another emerging issue I thought that might be valuable to mention here, and it's just come to the fore in the last couple of days in my mind anyway, it's about, maybe looking at things a little bit differently, maybe the focus of looking at transportation and people, people's implications, or transportation being about people more so than about infrastructure. And I think this is maybe a bit of a paradigm shift that TAC is going to have to think about as well. We were talking about community acceptance, we're talking about people's engagement in the process, communication, those types of things. So there's all these different elements that are going to continue to make the transportation industry challenging. So TAC will be at the forefront, hopefully, able to expand its capacity through partnerships, collaborations, that kind of thing, which they're actively pursuing. And I do think they will be challenged, although they have been successful at this in the past, in motivating and keeping their significant volunteer base, which really is what TAC stands for, and is really a credit to the organization.
Probably the biggest challenge that TAC will find is the changes in the way organizations are set up, and the provincial agencies have been the main driver of TAC in terms of funding and providing the core people. As the agencies downsize and outsource, getting continuity of people coming from the agencies is important. And in order to really contribute to and be part of TAC, you need to be involved. You can't just come to one meeting. You need to be there on an ongoing basis. The other challenge is going to be just the development of standards and pooled fund projects and so on, in terms of keeping that volunteer base. The people have to understand that you can't just give the money to get a project done. You have to have people on the steering committee and make sure that the product comes out of it serves the needs of your agency and the Canadian Transportation Group as a whole.
There's always technology. It keeps accelerating. There is a lot of discussion these days about driverless cars and what that means to certainly our design standards and how we plan around them. In addition, I think that we continue to be more focused on environmental issues, people issues. I think that the age of instant gratification continues to be upon us. People are looking for more prompt responses, immediate action. No one is prepared to wait and plan. Everybody wants an instant answer that makes them happy, which of course is not an impossible task, but one that really challenges us as an organization and individuals to be able to deliver on that.
On the people side, I would say again, it's not really a brain drain, but with the changing demographics, again, trying to encourage kids to get into the field of transportation engineering, show them how exciting it is as far as, you've got tangible benefits when you're done your job, you've got something to show for it. That's one of the reasons I got into it too. So I would see that as an emerging challenge is trying to get that feeder system as far as future engineers and technicians in the transportation engineering field. On the technical side, I'd say, again, on the environmentally sustainable construction practices and procedures and materials and that type of thing, I would say is a challenge going forward too.
It's the publications, how we're getting the publications out to the users. With social media, electronics, how we can get it out there faster, and that everybody understands what's there. The translation into French, which always seems to cause a concern. TAC as a whole, with the environment or the education and human resources, we need to be able to get the young engineers. I believe every province is facing that problem. They don't want to go work in a more remote area than some of the younger people, where you have great opportunities. So we have to go out to the rural areas and get them to understand what transportation is all about, the whys and whats. The same with environment work. Environment work has been increasing in all the years, in all the 30 years that I've been around. We're finally seeing some changes from some really challenging products from the old ways, and working with as a neutral forum, because TAC does not lobby, but all of us can get together that have common environmental problems, and we can form our own little lobbying group to go and get legislation changed that allows us to do our work better and faster, but still protects the environment. And you're going to see more and more, people are more aware of what's going on out there with roadways. And you see more protests. You want to build a wider road? Oh, you might not be able to. Or if you do it, you're going to be putting up sound walls, you're going to be doing other things that we never thought of many, many years ago. So TAC has to get itself out there. The transportation industry has to get itself out there saying, we're not the old-fashioned, we're from the government, we're here to help you. We're here, we're going to listen, we're going to address as much as possible your concerns, and if we can't address your concern 100%, here's why we can't. Giving that more interaction back and forth. I know it will drive some of the engineers around the bend, because they're not used to that interaction, talking to the people. But many people have great ideas for realignments, for different things that they're going. So it's up to the engineers to come back to TAC saying, we have this challenge, let's work together to address it through TAC. Just back and forth, because there's very, very bright people that populate TAC, and it's all its standing committees and councils that can work on these sorts of things. And many times when you do your networking, it's somebody has run into that sort of challenge, right there, or it's a similar version that you can just take it and modify it, and then perhaps it has to go into the geometric design guide or in manual uniform traffic control devices or someplace else. Here's something that happened that we addressed, and we addressed it how? In this manner, to go through the whole thing. So it's a long range. I want TAC to be around when my grandkids are my age. So, as an organization to promote transportation in Canada, because it is so important. CP Rail, or the rail line across Canada, started drawing us together. We have the Trans-Canada Highway through the whole thing. I want an excellent transportation system, because if not, as a country, as a province, whatever province it is, we're going to have a great deal of difficulty. Decreased budgets, we have to deal with. But we have excellent people researching how we can maintain roads and reconstruct roads, cheaper price, end up with the same result.
I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we're going to see going forward is trying to make active transportation work with the transportation network. Whether it's a municipal street or a rural highway, it's an emerging trend for active transportation, mostly in the urban area. But we're seeing a lot of pressures too on the highway network to make it active transportation friendly. And my concern is always the safety of the public, whether they're on a bicycle or another form of active transportation, or they're in a personal vehicle, or they're in a big truck, is that we have too many accidents on our highways as it is. And adding active transportation just makes it that much more complicated. I think every jurisdiction is quite concerned about the public safety on our highways, and we spend a lot of time and effort and money to try to ensure the safety of everybody on the highway. So those are two important aspects of tax mandate as we go forward.
I think there will be quite a few challenges. I think the first challenge was certainly to create more of a sustainable and secure way to develop or to undertake research in Canada in the area of transportation engineering, and more so in the area of road safety. There is no such center of excellence or research in Canada. and is struggling to put it together the funds required for such recent center. I think another challenge that we would need to look into the next few years is to create a kind of a center of excellence, but also a clearinghouse of information. So there will be more achievable, accessible for all practitioners in Canada. And perhaps the third challenge would be to keep up with the technology development so that we can create additional and closer communication ways to provide that even a greater opportunity for others that cannot come in person, but we still participate in what we do here twice a year.
I think there's going to be a considerable number of challenges. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think the focus on the environment will continue. Climate change is not going away. There'll be, I think, an increased demand to look at congestion on our infrastructure. Canada continues to grow, yet the cost of infrastructure and transportation is significant, and people will want to see more sustainable ideas on how we're going to address congestion. I think we'd be living with our heads in the sand if we didn't think about how vehicles are going to change. The autonomous vehicle, driverless vehicles, intelligent transportation systems are coming, are here, and I think that will have a significant impact on what TAC will have to look at in the future, as well as the demographics of the transportation industry and many other industries, especially in engineering, where the number of engineers are dwindling. The retirement profile, the majority of them will be retiring within the next 5 years. Many senior members of many organizations will be retiring, so there'll be a big change in terms of the demographic of TAC and of the people in the transportation organization. So I think all of those will be interesting facets as we move forward over the next 10, 20, and 100 years with TAC.
I think I see three that strike me immediately. The first would be, first of all, the graying and aging of the profession. I think in the next 10 or 20 years, we're going to have a great turnover in the profession of people who are currently have senior positions and who carry the wisdom, if you will, of the transportation profession within them. And we not only have to find the people to take their place, but we have to transfer that knowledge from the older generation to the newer generation. And I think the TAC is doing good work in that through the TAC Foundation and all its scholarships to find those people and encourage them to come into transportation as a profession. But that's going to only increase in terms of the need to tackle that issue and to devote more resources to it. I think another challenge is going to be to continue to reach out to other sectors other than transportation, to partner with them and to find solutions to messy problems that we can't solve strictly within our own sector. So fields like environmental sciences and land use planning and economics, they're all working on issues related to ours. They don't have the solutions and we don't have the solutions, but together we can find the solutions. And that's a difficult thing for an organization to do in some cases, but I think that's why it's a challenge, is because it is very important and it's not an easy thing to do. And I think the third challenge is a more generic one, which I think probably a lot of professional associations face, which is that the function of the profession is, the function of the association rather, is to both foster specialization, which divides and separates elements of the profession into more discrete units as time goes by, and also to foster integration among the different elements of the transportation spectrum. So the association is both working to create new divisions within it and also to pull it all together at the same time. And I think that's a fundamental tension that becomes more challenging as time goes on, is to prevent a splintering or a loss of support for some of those more discrete elements of the profession that we've created by encouraging their specialization and encouraging knowledge building in those smaller areas without losing them as part of the overall picture. And that's certainly a challenge that I've seen in the last decade, so I can imagine over 20 years that it's going to be an even greater challenge.
Well, there's a couple, I'll say probably four that stick out in my mind. First is the importance of transportation to the economy. I think we've come to realize with unfortunate events like Lac Mégantic last summer, with the growth in trade from China, that goods move on the transportation system. And normally goods move in a multimodal way. They don't normally just take one mode of transport. So often they're using a truck to rail and to a port and an airport and things like that. So having TAC work more closely with the other modal associations is going to be extremely important if Canada wants to do really well in the global economy to support our trade. And with the increasing number of free trade agreements that we have, I think the world is ours to exploit, but we need to have a really good system. We're doing that at the federal level in the other modes, and having provinces and territories and municipalities be part of that, and TAC playing a key role in making sure that we have the standards and the discussions, the research, that will be extremely important. So that's one. The second one, again, has come really clear to us this winter. With the severe winter that we had, it affected all the modes of transportation. Our airports, for the first time that I can remember, had to close down for a couple days. Pearson, Ottawa, Montreal. Our ports encountered major disruptions, whether it was because of ice on the St. Lawrence Seaway or heavy winds on the oceans. Our rail system had to slow down. You've heard of problems with grain transportation. All of those things are because of the environmental impacts that are happening. We can argue whether they're related to climate change or not, but we're seeing this more and more. And so adaptation of the system, of the transportation system, to the severe weather and natural disasters is going to be critical. And I think that TAC plays, or can play, a really important forum for bringing parties together to look at best practices. How do we make our system adapt to the changing environment and making it more resilient, and building infrastructure that can handle the kind of events that are happening. So that's the second one. The third one, given that our population is aging, it's going to change the way people move. We have an older population, but also a more mobile population, right? They're going to be able to, they have money, they're going to be able to travel, they'll want to travel, they want to continue to be active. And so we're going to have to think through, how does the aging population, or what are the needs of the aging population for the transportation system? So more accessible transportation, perhaps more rail or more transit, but we need to make it, I'll say, easily accessible for the more elderly population, in addition to the younger population and perhaps the lower income population that currently is served fairly well. So that's an area that we have to look at it in all modes, and I think, again, TAC in its research capacity and looking at standards across the system can play a really important role there. And then finally, I think what we've seen in Canada is that because of things like fiscal constraints, that jurisdictions don't have the funding that they used to have to invest in research or invest in the development of standards or guidelines. And more, we see it at the federal level. Partnerships become critical, and that's partnerships both in terms of technical elements that we want to look at, but also partnerships in terms of funding of infrastructure, funding of for roads, for transit. So looking at the financially sustainable approaches for funding of the transportation system, both construction as well as maintenance and operations, is going to be an increasing mode or way that infrastructure will be developed and operated in the future. And again, I think TAC has a really important role to play there, because it does provide a venue where we have both the public sectors as well as the private sectors and the academic sector. So all of those four are really important trends or issues or opportunities that lie ahead of TAC, and I think it'll be important over the next few years to focus some effort in those areas.
Well, I think the first one that would come to mind, I think comes to everybody's mind, is climate change. We are quite aware of the issues that climate change is bringing to Canada, in terms of its immediacy in the north, but also in terms of all areas within Canada. Another area would be, of course, the issue that we presently have with recruiting and retaining professional and non-professional transportation tradespeople, construction people, and professionals alike. And I think one of the newest ones that's just come up this meeting is the issue of the eventual issue of integration of autonomous vehicles within our road network system. So TAC will always work on the the issues of the day, the issues that are important to the transportation industries in Canada in general.
I think there'll be three things that TAC will have to face head on. One is the huge public expectation about safety in transportation, and the fact that they get into their cars, or they get onto a train, or they get onto a boat, that they're going to go from point A to point B in a very safe and secure manner. The second issue is just the huge technical issues that are coming across in terms of road construction, bridge construction, railway construction, port construction, and how that's all going to change with climate change, with high floods, and all the other things that Mother Nature are throwing at engineers as they try to build infrastructure. And the third emergent issue would be the re-energization of our infrastructure. It's 40 to 50 years old now in terms of average age, and I think that Canada will have to go into a huge rebuilding program to upgrade the whole transportation infrastructure to meet the needs of the next 100 years.
Well, there are quite a few, I think, emerging trends or issues that they'll have to face. So some of those are existing today, but they will be a challenge in needing to be addressed in the future for sure. One is the infrastructure deficit, the lack of funding that exists out there, and the need to find innovative funding tools to satisfy that deficit. The implications of new technologies. For example, we're moving towards driverless cars. How is that going to affect the way we do our business in terms of road design, in terms of signage? It's also the aging population. Our population is aging, so how is that going to affect signage? How is that going to affect our road design as well? There's also the whole issue of knowledge transfer. How do you transfer that knowledge from people who are retiring from the workforce into the younger generation? There's also the effects of climate change. Climate change is a big issue. We know that the permafrost is melting, and that's going to have an impact on our infrastructure. We also have extreme variations in weather events across the country, and that affects our transportation system. So those things need to be addressed in the future. We also need to reduce our environmental footprint for our transportation systems and infrastructure to become more sustainable. We also have to start thinking about improving mobility. It's no longer sufficient to think about moving cars or trucks. We really have to think about moving people and goods, and what are the best ways of doing that. And we also have to learn to do more with less through innovation and productivity gains. So I see those as being the key issues facing the industry.